The testis basically is divided into somewhere between 250 and 300 of these little compartments. Inside of these compartments is anywhere between 1 and 4 of these 3-foot-long tubules. All right, so let's do some simple math here. Let's just say, for argument's sake, 4 tubules, each of them 3 feet long, in 250 of these compartments. Right? If you took these tubules, pulled them out of the testis, and laid it end to end, it would hurt a lot. And all of those tubes are there for one function. And what is the one function of all those tubes? Making sperm, exactly. Making sperm. Not maturing them, right? Making the sperm. This structure is what is known as a seminiferous tubule. All right? The seminiferous tubule basically contains, we'll do it black, stem cells that divide rapidly, producing new cells. As these new cells are made and developed, they move towards the lumen of our seminiferous tubule, and by the time they reach the lumen, we have basically sperm-shaped cells. They're not mature yet, they're not capable of fertilizing an egg, but they're there. So there's this massive development of sperm production that takes place. Obviously, sperm are very specialized cells, and this requires a tremendous amount of structure and organization processing that needs to take place. And remind me again, what is the hormone that is responsible for sperm production? What was the hormone that was responsible for sperm production? Say again? No, not androgens. What hormone, anterior pituitary hormone, causes the production of sperm? Say again? Follicle stimulating hormone. Yeah, it's one of the gonadotropins, but in particular, follicle stimulating hormone. However, follicle-stimulating hormone doesn't actually affect the stem cell. It turns out that there are these specialized cells, and I'm going to draw it as a big, huge block here, known as a nurse cell, or a sustentacular cell, or a Sertoli cell. We'll use the term nurse. That basically are responsible for a lot of things. These nurse cells are the ones that are responsible for directing the sperm development, sperm production, let's say it that way. Sperm are basically chromosomal missiles. When it comes to reproduction, all the male provides to the system is half of the genetic material. That sperm is something like 1/1000th of the size of an egg or something crazy like that. All of the functional things inside of a cell, the Golgi apparatus, the rough endoplasmic reticulum, the mitochondria, all of those things all come from mom, all come from the egg. All the male provides is half of the genetic material. So basically the sperm is a specialized structure whose sole goal is to get that genetic material to the egg. It's the only self-propelling cell in the body, or in humans, right? And it's basically shed most of its material, right? It doesn't have a Golgi apparatus. It doesn't have a rough endoplasmic reticulum or all those kind of things. So when those resources are shed during the developmental process, the nurse cells are responsible for endocytosing those resources and redistributing them back to more stem cells so that this process can continue. So not only do they direct sperm production, but they also are involved in the endocytosis of resources. These cells are also very different from our normal human cells. Our normal somatic cells. So different enough that our immune system might not recognize them and could attack them. So the nurse cells help to form our blood testis barrier. These are hugely important cells. And so, it is the follicle-stimulating hormone that actually targets the nurse cell. Stimulates the nurse cell, and then the nurse cells then stimulate sperm production. And nurse cells do one other thing. Right? As we talked about, sperm production is an incredibly rapid process. We make well, no, it's not a rapid process. It's a very extensive process, making billions of new sperm every day. All right? However, is more necessarily better? No. So the other thing that nurse cells do is they produce inhibin. So again, here we're producing inhibin, and it is going to affect the anterior pituitary.
So the inhibin has the same effect as we did in the
Yeah,
females.
so again, inhibin is still going to target the anterior pituitary, and it is going to reduce the amount of follicle-stimulating hormone being produced.
And then one more thing, the nurse cell you said directs the sperm production, so
Yep.
it directs the stem cells to.
Divide and become sperm-shaped cells, exactly. Yes?
When you said nurse cells are involved in the cytosis of the resources, and you were also meant distributing them as well, right?
Yeah, so basically, as this cell divides and as it sheds a bunch of its material to become a chromosome missile, then it is going to give that new resources back to the new stem cells that are dividing so that they have those resources, basically recycle resources. And again, we'll talk about this process in much more depth when we get to the reproductive system. I just want you to have a basic understanding of the anatomy of the seminiferous tubule. This structure here, these are the seminiferous tubules, where we see the many cells being produced. All right? But really, none of this has anything to do with what we're here for. We're here for the endocrine system. And the endocrine function of the testis doesn't occur in the seminiferous tubule. It occurs out here in these cells that are outside the seminiferous tubules. Alongside of the seminiferous tubules are clusters of cells, basically in the interstitial tissue, within the tissue of the cells. So what do you think we call these cells? Yeah, these are the interstitial cells. Also sometimes called the interstitial cells of Leydig. Good old Bob Leydig is the first one to describe these. And these are the cells that produce our androgens. So here outside of the testis, and they've given us a testis here on our chart as well. It's in the bottom quarter. This one looks a little better than the ovary one. You can clearly see a seminiferous tubule, clearly see sperm, but what we care about are the cells outside the seminiferous tubule. Those interstitial cells that are responsible for producing the class of hormones that are androgens, and of course the most common androgen is testosterone. I think there's something like 8 different androgens that are produced, but testosterone is by far the most common. So again, not part of the whole seminiferous tubule. That is solely for sperm production. And so instead, outside of that, we have those interstitial cells. And in fact, one of the things that was mentioned earlier, androgens play no role in the development of sperm. A male could continue to produce billions of sperm every day, even if he produced no androgens. However, he would not be capable of fertilizing an egg. Because while androgens are not needed to make sperm, they are needed to mature the sperm. So when we talk about the functions, androgens are needed for the maturation of the sperm. That doesn't even happen in the testis. It happens in a structure called the epididymis, which again, you don't need to know for now. But the point is, it doesn't make sperm, but it does mature them. And then, as we talked about, it's the masculizing hormone. Right? This is the one that promotes male secondary characteristics, increase in muscle and bone mass, enlargement of the cartilage of the larynx, thickening of the vocal cords, right? Secondary hairs, broadening of the shoulders, all of those things that we associate with the difference between a boy and a man. Those are the things. And as we also talked about, things like aggression, things like libido. And while it's follicle-stimulating hormone that leads to sperm production, what leads to androgen productions? How is it regulated? Hormonally, but what hormone? No, luteinizing hormone. Remember, luteinizing hormone does progesterones and testosterones. All right. Questions on those? Yes?
So does the androgens that's produced by the interstitial cells, does that end up like traveling to the epididymis?
Yeah, so remember, this is being released in, so this is a great question. This is being released into interstitial fluid. So some of when it's being released into the interstitial fluid, it'll end up in a blood vessel and then go throughout the body. But some of it will diffuse here into the seminiferous tubule, right? Nurse cells, very aptly named, because when you go to the hospital, who does pretty much everything?
Nurse.
The nurses, right? Not only are they directing the sperm to become sperm, not only are they recycling the resources, not only are they forming the protective barrier, not only are they producing inhibin, but they also produce a protein called an androgen binding protein. I think this probably should have gone without saying, but we'll say it anyway. What class of hormones are androgens? Lipid-based. Right? There's one of our few places that we talked about where we make steroid hormones. Right? So what happens is these nurse cells basically make little bundles of proteins that our androgens can bind to. And then they can be transported within the fluid of the seminiferous tubule to the epididymis, where then they can be used to mature the sperm. So yeah, so the nurses also make the 6-packs to carry those androgens to the epididymis so that it can be matured there. All right. And then we talked about ending as well. All right. With that, we are done with